Invitation arrived on a Tuesday, which felt intentional somehow. Like my mother knew I'd spend the whole week turning it over in my hands, reading it again and again, trying to find my name somewhere between the gold embossed letters. It wasn't there. My brother's engagement party, 40 people invited, my parents' house, the one I grew up in, the one where I'd slept in the second bedroom for 18 years. And my name was not on that list. I found out the way you find out about most things that are designed to hurt you, through someone who assumed you already knew. My aunt called to say she was excited to see me there, and I had to tell her I hadn't received anything. She got quiet in the way people do when they realize they've accidentally handed you a grenade. "Oh," she said. "Oh, honey, I'm sure it's just an oversight." It wasn't an oversight. My mother doesn't make oversights. She cross-references guest lists like she's managing a state dinner. I want to back up because if I just tell you the ending, you won't understand why that single moment, the moment everything finally shifted, hit me the way it did. You need to understand what it cost me to keep showing up for a family that kept finding new ways to make clear I wasn't really wanted. My parents divorced when I was 11. My father moved to Oregon, remarried, had 2 more kids, and became the kind of distant that doesn't feel like cruelty because it's so consistent you just stop expecting anything else. My mother remarried too, a man named Douglas who had money, connections, and a son from his first marriage who my mother decided was the child she'd always actually wanted. That son was my brother now. Technically. His name was Spencer. He was 3 years older than me, handsome in the way that gets easier as men age, and he had a laugh that filled whatever room he was in. I didn't dislike Spencer. That would have been easier, actually. He was fine. He was perfectly, genuinely fine, and my mother loved him with an openness she had never once directed at me. I don't say that to be dramatic. I say it because it's the plainest way to describe what I watched happen over the course of my teenage years. She went to every one of his lacrosse games. She sat in the kitchen with him doing homework. She took him to get his driver's license and cried a little when he passed. She did not do those things with me, and she did not explain why, and I eventually stopped asking. When I was 17, I told her I wanted to apply to nursing school. Not just any program. The accelerated BSN track at a university 4 hours away. The one with the teaching hospital attached. The one that would let me start clinical rotations in my second year. I'd researched it for months. I had the application half finished on my laptop. She looked at me from across the kitchen counter and said, "Nursing is fine for some people." I waited for more. There wasn't more. I got in. I paid for most of it myself through loans and a scholarship I'd applied for without telling anyone, because I'd learned by then that sharing things with my mother before they happened gave her the opportunity to talk me out of them. I moved into a dorm in August, and she didn't help me carry boxes. The next 6 years were the best of my life, and the loneliest. I graduated with my BSN, passed my boards on the first attempt, and got hired at a Level I trauma center 40 minutes outside the city. I worked nights for 2 years because nights paid more and I still had loans. I watched people come in broken and leave whole, or sometimes didn't leave at all, and I learned to hold that weight without letting it crush me. I became good at my job the way you become good at anything, by doing it over and over in conditions that didn't leave room for error. By the time I was 28, I was a charge nurse in the emergency department. I was also, for the first time in my adult life, genuinely proud of myself in a way that had nothing to do with anyone else's opinion of me. My mother called maybe once a month. The conversations were short. She asked surface questions and I gave surface answers, and we both pretended that was a relationship. Spencer got engaged in November. Her name was Brooke, and she came from the kind of family my mother and Douglas had always wanted to be adjacent to. Her father was a cardiologist. Her mother sat on the board of 2 nonprofits, and they had a house in Hilton Head they used every August. My mother loved Brooke immediately, completely, with that same open warmth I'd watched her give Spencer for years. I found out about the engagement on Instagram. I called my mother the next day, kept my voice easy, congratulated her on the news. She said, "Oh, you saw. I was going to call you." She had not been going to call me. The engagement party was in February. 38 people in my parents' living room, and I was not one of them. When my aunt let it slip, I sat with it for a full day before I called my mother. "It was just going to be close family," she said. "I am close family." Silence. The particular silence she used when she was deciding whether to engage or to simply wait for me to give up. It's Spencer and Brooke's event. We were trying to keep it intimate. You have 38 people coming. I think you're making this into something it isn't. I didn't go to the engagement party. I worked a 12-hour shift instead, and on my break I sat in the break room with a bad cup of coffee and texted my friend Zoe, who had watched me navigate my family for 15 years and knew exactly how to respond. She sent back a voice memo that was 2 minutes of her saying increasingly unhinged things about my mother's decorating choices that made me laugh until a resident poked her head in to check if I was okay. I told myself it didn't matter. I'd gotten good at telling myself that. The wedding was scheduled for June, in Savannah. Spencer and Brooke had rented out a venue near the waterfront, one of those old converted buildings with exposed brick and Edison bulbs and a courtyard with a fountain. I'd seen the photos on Brooke's Instagram. It looked beautiful. My invitation arrived in March. It was addressed to me and my plus one, which I found strange, since my mother knew I wasn't seeing anyone. The envelope had a wax seal. I held it for a moment before I opened it. I was invited to the ceremony and the reception. I was listed in the program, under Spencer's side as his stepsister. Not in the wedding party. Not at the head table. Not asked to speak, or to do a reading, or to hand out programs at the door. Stepsister, in small font, between his college roommate and Douglas's business partner. That was fine. I told myself that was fine. I bought a dress in April. Dusty rose, midi length, the kind of thing you wear to a wedding where you are a guest and not much else. I got my hair done the morning of. I drove 4 hours to Savannah alone, listening to a podcast about cold cases because it was the only thing that could occupy enough of my brain to keep me from turning around. 2 days before the wedding, I got a text from my mother. Please don't make a scene. This is Spencer and Brooke's day. I read it 4 times. I had not indicated in any way that I planned to make a scene. I had not even called to ask about seating arrangements. I had simply RSVP'd yes and bought a dress and showed up to the city. I wrote back, I'm not planning to make anything. I'll see you Saturday. She didn't respond. The venue was everything the photos had promised. I arrived on time, found my seat, round table near the back, next to a couple I didn't know, and Douglas's cousin who spent most of the cocktail hour on his phone. The ceremony was outdoors in the courtyard. Spencer cried when he saw Brooke at the end of the aisle. It was genuinely sweet. I sat with my hands in my lap and watched my mother dab at her eyes from the front row, and I thought, with a clarity that surprised me, I do not belong to these people. Not because they've made me feel that way, though they had, but because belonging is something you feel or you don't. And sitting in that courtyard on a warm Saturday in June, I finally admitted to myself that I had never felt it. Not once. Not even as a child. I had always been slightly outside, pressing my face to the glass, hoping someone would notice and open the door. No one had opened the door. The reception moved inside. Round tables with white linens, candles, a band setting up in the corner. I found my table, introduced myself to the couple beside me. They were friends of Brooke's from college. Warm people who asked genuine questions and didn't look past me when someone more important walked by. The toast started around 7. Douglas gave one, then Brooke's father, then her maid of honor, then her brother. The best man went last on Spencer's side. It was funny and a little embarrassing and very clearly the speech of a man who'd been Spencer's best friend for 20 years. No one called my name. No one acknowledged I existed except as a body occupying a chair near the back. I ate the salmon. I drank 1 glass of wine slowly. The band started playing and the couple beside me got up to dance, and I sat there with my hands around my empty water glass, watching my mother float between tables, stopping to embrace person after person, laughing that particular laugh she used in public, bright and easy and nothing like the woman I'd grown up with. She passed within 3 feet of me, didn't stop. I was about to get up and find the restroom, give myself 5 minutes alone to decide whether I was going to stay for the cake or slip out early and spare myself the last hour of this, when I heard my name. Not from the stage, not from a microphone. From a woman 2 tables over who had just looked up from her conversation and gone very still. I didn't recognize her immediately. She was in her early 60s, dark blazer over a silk blouse, the kind of woman who looks composed even when she's surprised. She was with a man about the same age and 2 younger people who I'd guess were her kids. She stood up. "Excuse me," she said to the table. "To the room. To no one in particular." She walked toward me and I genuinely had no idea what was happening. "You're Douglas's stepdaughter?" she said when she reached me. "The nurse?" "I am," I said. She turned to the man she'd been sitting with. "Walter," she said, and something in her voice made him stand up too. "This is her. This is the one I told you about." I still didn't understand. "I was in your emergency department," she said. 14 months ago. February. I came in by ambulance. My heart, we thought at first. It wasn't my heart, it turned out. But I was alone, and I was terrified, and you stayed with me." She paused. Her eyes were bright. "You held my hand while we waited for imaging. You explained everything before it happened. You called my daughter when I couldn't make my hands stop shaking." Another pause. "I asked for your name before I left. I wrote it in my phone." I remembered her then, not the details. We see hundreds of patients, and I couldn't have told you her specific case if you'd asked me this morning. But something about her face came back to me. Some memory of a scared woman in a hospital gown who had squeezed my hand and said thank you in the voice of someone who meant it, the way people mean it when they've had to mean it. "You probably don't remember me," she said. "I do," I said, "a little." "She's been looking for a way to thank you properly for a year," her husband said. He had the easy warmth of a man who meant what he said. The woman, her name was Margot, she told me, Margot Fielding, and her husband was Walter, and yes, those were her kids, looked at me for a moment like she was figuring out how to say something. "What you do matters," she said. "I just want you to know that. What you did for me that night, I went home and I looked up your hospital's foundation and I made a donation because I didn't know what else to do. And now here you are at the same wedding and I think the universe is telling me I should say it to your face." I didn't cry. I'm not a crier, not in public, not usually. But something happened in my chest that I didn't have a word for. A kind of loosening, like something that had been pulled very tight for a very long time. Finally let go just a little. I looked up and my mother was standing 12 feet away. She had stopped mid-conversation with someone from Douglas's office. She was watching. I don't know exactly what she saw. A woman in a blazer holding both of my hands, speaking to me with the kind of intensity that draws a room's attention, her husband standing beside her, their adult children watching from the table. She saw Margot turn to the room, not dramatically, not with any particular performance, and say to her husband, loudly enough that the nearest 3 tables heard, "This woman takes care of people the way it should be done, the way it actually matters." She saw the couple from my table, Brooke's college friends, lean over to ask what was happening. She saw Douglas's cousin put down his phone. She saw me, for maybe the first time all night, as something other than an obligation she'd chosen to seat near the back. Walter asked me what I was working on now, and I told him about the emergency department, about charge nursing, about the grant proposal my department had just submitted for a mental health crisis intervention program. He asked follow-up questions, real ones, the kind you don't ask if you're not actually listening. We talked for 20 minutes. The band played, the cake was cut somewhere in the background. I barely noticed. When Margot and her husband finally said goodbye, they had an early flight, she apologized twice for leaving. She hugged me. Not the brief, polite hug of strangers at a social event. A real one. "Take care of yourself," she said, "not just everyone else." I stood there after they left, and I felt the room differently than I had an hour ago. Not triumphant. Not vindicated in some movie revenge way. Just clear. Like something had been confirmed that I already knew, but hadn't been able to hold on to. My mother appeared at my elbow around 9:30. The party was winding down, the band playing slower songs, half the tables empty. "Who was that woman?" she asked. Her voice was careful. "A patient," I said. "A former patient." "She seemed to know you well." "She remembered me," I said, "from a hard night she had." My mother was quiet for a moment. "You didn't tell me you were a charge nurse." I looked at her. "I've been a charge nurse for over a year." She opened her mouth and closed it. In it, I could see the beginning of something. Some version of a conversation we'd never had, The one where she asked me real questions and listened to real answers. Where she looked at the life I'd built and actually saw it. I didn't wait for it. "Tell Spencer congratulations again," I said. The wedding was beautiful. I picked up my clutch and walked out through the courtyard, past the fountain, out onto the street where the Savannah evening was warm and smelled like flowers from somewhere nearby. I called Zoe from the sidewalk. She picked up on the second ring. "Tell me everything," she said. I did, standing on the sidewalk with my heels in my hand, the noise of the reception fading behind me. I told her all of it. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I didn't feel like I was explaining something painful. I felt like I was describing something that had finally, quietly, made sense. I drove home the next morning with the windows down. Somewhere around the 2-hour mark, when the highway opened up and the sky went wide and flat and blue in every direction, I thought about Margot. About her writing my name in her phone. About the fact that she carried that gratitude for 14 months, through a whole year of her life, and then walked across a room full of strangers to hand it to me in person. People remember how you make them feel. She'd told me that without saying it. She'd stood up at a wedding reception and shown a room full of people who I was, and she'd done it not out of pity or performance. She'd done it because she meant it. My family had spent years deciding what I was worth. They made that calculation quietly, in the font size of a wedding program, in the address field of an invitation, in a text message asking me not to embarrass them. I was 30 years old, driving home through a blue Georgia morning, and I understood something I hadn't fully let myself understand before. I didn't need them to revise their calculation. Their calculation wasn't the one that counted. The ones that count are the ones made at 2 in the morning in a hospital room when someone is scared and alone and reaches for your hand. I was very good at those. I keep thinking about the moment Margot stood up. She didn't have to. No one asked her to. There was no dramatic music, no perfectly timed lighting. She just looked across a room full of people who had known me my whole life and decided that what she knew about me in a single February night mattered more than whatever I'd been reduced to in that wedding program. She stood up because it was the right thing to do. That's all. And somehow, that simple decision, made quietly, without announcement, undid years of something I hadn't realized I was still carrying. I've thought a lot about why the people who are supposed to love us are sometimes the last ones to actually see us. I don't think it's cruelty most of the time. I think it's a failure of attention. My mother had decided early on what kind of person I was going to be, and then she just kept looking for evidence of that version of me instead of looking at who I'd actually become. That's not a character flaw, exactly. It's a kind of intellectual laziness. The refusal to update what you think you know when new information keeps arriving. She knew the 17-year-old who left for nursing school without asking permission. She never quite got around to knowing the charge nurse who ran a trauma bay. That laziness has a cost, not just to the person being unseen, though that cost is real and it compounds quietly over years, but to the person doing the not seeing. My mother missed something. She missed a whole version of me that turned out to be the truest one. She'll keep missing it until she decides to look differently, and I finally accepted that I cannot make that decision for her. What I can do is keep showing up the way I showed up that night Margot came in. Terrified, alone, convinced something was ending. I held her hand because she needed someone to hold it. I explained things slowly because fear makes people need things said more than once. I called her daughter because she couldn't make her hand stop shaking. None of that required anything extraordinary from me. It required paying attention. It required caring about the person in front of me more than I cared about getting through my shift. That's the thing I keep coming back to. The life I built, the one my family never quite respected, is built entirely out of moments like that. Moments where someone needed steadiness and I had it to give. Where someone needed clarity in the middle of chaos and I could provide it. You don't develop that capacity by accident. You develop it by choosing over and over to do hard things without the guarantee that anyone will notice. You develop it by staying in the room when leaving would be easier. By doing the work on nights when the work is thankless and the hours are long and no one is handing out recognition. I drove home from Savannah with the windows down and the radio off, and I thought, I have been building something real this whole time. Not flashy. Not the kind of thing that gets toasted at a wedding reception by people in expensive suits. But real, The kind of reel that a woman carries in her phone for 14 months because she wants to find a way to say thank you. That's enough. That has always been enough. I just needed one stranger to stand up and say so before I fully believed it.